Diane turned 60. She expected the usual. More doctor visits, reading glasses, and maybe a few new gray hairs. What she didn't expect was the silence. It wasn't that people stopped talking to her. It's that no one warned her what life after 60 really feels like. Sure, society talks about retirement plans and health screenings, but no one talks about the invisible shift that happens inside. It's like one day you're relevant, and the next, you're gently moved to the side, Diane said, stirring her tea. No one prepares you for the emotional weight of becoming unseen. This was the shocking truth Diane discovered. Turning 60 isn't just about aging skin or slowing joints. It's about how the world starts treating you differently, and how that shift can quietly eat at your confidence unless you fight back. She first noticed it at work. Her opinions, once sought after, were now politely ignored. Younger colleagues assumed she was out of touch. Friends began talking about downsizing, settling down, and accepting aches as normal. But Diane wasn't ready to settle. She wanted to thrive. That's when she made a bold decision to rewrite her narrative. She signed up for a pottery class she'd always wanted to try, joined a local walking group, and started learning how to play the ukulele. It wasn't about proving something to others. It was about reclaiming joy and curiosity. She also started journaling each morning, documenting what she was learning, how she was changing, and how much life there still was to live. As Diane connected with other women her age, she realized she wasn't alone. Many felt lost after 60, not because of aging itself, but because society had subtly told them their best years were over. They don't say it out loud, Diane noted, but they stop expecting anything exciting to happen to you, and that's what hurts the most. But something unexpected came from this awareness: power. Once Diane acknowledged what was happening, she could choose a different path. She stopped apologizing for her age. She wore bold colors, spoke her mind, and took up space. She mentored younger women, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, and she had a lot to say. Now 64, Diane walks with more confidence than she did in her 30s. She laughs louder, she says no more often. And she's planning a solo trip to Italy, a lifelong dream she once believed was too late to chase. Here's the real truth after 60. Yes, your body changes. Yes, people may underestimate you. But what most don't talk about is that this chapter can be the most powerful of all, if you're willing to embrace it. Because after 60, you stop living for others. You start living for yourself. And that is where life begins again. Let me know if you'd like this adapted for audio or shortened into a script. She stopped trying to shrink herself to fit expectations. She noticed something remarkable. Others started rising with her. Her friend Carol, 62, confessed that she'd been quietly battling a fear of becoming invisible too. I used to be the go-to person at work, she said one afternoon over lunch. Now I feel like I'm just in the way. Inspired by Diane's bold steps, Carol joined a storytelling circle at the local library and began writing her memoir. They weren't chasing youth. They were reclaiming relevance. Diane also began volunteering at a local community center, leading creative workshops for women over 60. She quickly discovered that her age, once considered a limitation, had become her greatest asset. With decades of lived experience and emotional wisdom, she could offer perspective that younger generations were hungry for, but didn't always know how to ask for. Women showed up to her classes not just for art, but for connection. They wanted to feel seen again, to be reminded that their lives still held meaning and momentum. One afternoon, a woman named Patricia shared something that stuck with Diane. After 60, she said, you stop chasing approval. You stop trying to impress the room. You just want to be fully and unapologetically. That idea sat in Diane's heart for days. It was true. There was something deeply freeing about this stage of life. While younger years were marked by ambition, performance, and worry about how others saw her, her 60s were becoming a season of authenticity. The masks had dropped. The pressure to pretend was gone. But that didn't mean it was all easy. Diane still had days where her knees ached, where loneliness crept in, or when the headlines made her wonder what kind of world she was aging into. She had friends facing health scares, loss, and even depression. Aging wasn't always graceful. It was messy, emotional, and often ignored by mainstream culture. But Diane believed in facing it head on. That's why she started a blog. 60 and Sovereign. It was part journal, part resource, part rebellion. She wrote about everything: gray hair, sex after menopause, solo travel tips, finding new purpose, and grieving old identities. Her readership grew. Strangers wrote in, thanking her for saying the quiet parts out loud. The more Diane spoke her truth, the more empowered she became. Her 60s weren't an ending. They were a homecoming, a return to herself. She no longer feared becoming invisible because she had learned to see herself. And in doing so, she gave others permission to do the same. She used to think 60 marked a slow fade into the background. Now, she knew better. After 60, you don't disappear. You arrive. Let me know if you'd like a summary or a short version made into a voice clip. As Diane stepped further into her new life, she began to realize that aging wasn't something to fear. It was something to own. With every passing year, she felt more grounded in who she was. The insecurities that once ruled her decisions faded into the background. She no longer dressed to impress, she dressed to express. She no longer filled her calendar to stay busy. She filled it with what mattered: people, projects, and passions that made her feel alive. One morning, as she walked through the park near her house, she paused under a blooming magnolia tree and smiled. This is it, she thought. This is what freedom feels like. Not the loud, reckless freedom of youth, but a quieter, deeper kind. The freedom of knowing yourself, trusting your choices, and finally putting yourself first. And that, perhaps, was the biggest secret no one talks about after 60. That life doesn't shrink unless you let it. In fact, it can expand in ways you never imagined. Diane didn't just survive the shift, she became the shift. And as she looked ahead to 70 and beyond, she no longer asked, "What will I lose?" Instead, she asked, "What else is waiting for me?" Let me know if you'd like a short excerpt made into a voiceover.